On the second night after my birthday, my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "You don't need fresh fruit anymore, Mum. It just goes bad." That was when I knew they didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as a chore. As a set of bills. As an inconvenience that hadn't yet expired. I didn't always feel like a ghost in my own kitchen. There was a time, not so long ago, when the house smelled of baked apples, warm butter, and clean laundry. A time when my hands didn't tremble opening a refrigerator, afraid of what might not be there. Back then, this was my space. I ruled it. I decided what was cooked, who sat where, and when the kettle whistled. But now? Now even the hum of the appliances seems indifferent. I'm Margaret. 75. Widow of 32 years. I raised 2 children on a secretary's salary, packed every lunch, ironed every shirt, held every feverish head through the night. I loved them more than I feared the world, and I feared the world plenty. When their father died, I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't ask for anything. I just kept going. Because that's what you do when you love people, isn't it? You keep going. Until one day, you notice they stopped walking beside you. It started quietly. Subtle things that were easy to miss. Elaine, my daughter, told me I was wasting money on groceries. She opened my fridge like it offended her. "You can't even finish a whole bag of apples before they go soft, Mum." Her voice, sharp, fast, a little too loud, wasn't meant to help. It was meant to correct. To put me in my place. And I let her. I stood there, clutching the edge of the counter, nodding like a scolded child. Charles, my son, added from the hallway, "You're not running marathons anymore. You don't need all that stuff." He laughed. A short, careless sound. But it echoed in my chest. Not because it was funny. But because it showed me exactly what he thought of me. Old. Weak. Useless. That night, I opened the fridge and found 1 apple left. Soft. Wrinkled. Bruised. I picked it up. Held it. And just stared. It looked like something forgotten. I saw myself in it, and I hated that. I wasn't always like this. Elaine began leaving notes. "Don't forget your pills. Turn off the stove. Lock the front door." Written like reminders. But they weren't kind. They were orders. They assumed I was slipping. That I needed to be managed. I stood at the counter, looking at her notes, feeling each one like a little slap to the face. I still remembered how to lock a door. "Charles took over my bank account when I fractured my wrist 2 winters ago. Just until you're better," he said. That was almost 2 years ago. When I asked for access again, he smiled. "You don't need to worry about that stuff anymore, Mum." That phrase, "you don't need to worry," what he really meant was, stay out of it. I saw boxes delivered to his house. Electronics. Shoes. Headphones. All under my name. Things I never ordered, never agreed to. When I asked, he waved it off, "Just small things, Mum. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. Elaine used the same word when I told her the sink was leaking. "You always think everything's a disaster." It wasn't a disaster. It was a leak. A simple fix. But her words made it sound like I was the problem. Like I was imagining things. Like my worries weren't real. It's the same tone she uses when she checks my cabinets. "You haven't finished this soup. No more until it's gone." Like I'm on punishment. Like I'm a child again. She controls what I eat now. She says she's saving money. For who, I wonder? I looked in the bin one day and found receipts. My groceries, $27. Hers and Charles's, $218. They eat steak. I eat old rice. I'm in my own house, the one I paid for, and I feel like a stranger. I feel hungry. Not just for food. For care. For respect. Last week, I found the milk had spoiled. I hadn't had tea in 3 days. Elaine said, "You never drink it anyway." That was a lie. I drink tea every morning. Or at least I used to. Before the milk turned sour and my fridge stayed empty. She brings groceries once a week. Cheap things. No fresh produce. No bread I actually like. Just cans. Things that store long but taste like metal. When I ask for something different, she says, "You're being picky." Picky. For wanting food that isn't expired. Elaine moves through my kitchen like she owns it. Tossing out things I still use. Reorganizing shelves I didn't ask her to touch. She doesn't ask. She just acts. Then she turns to me with a fake smile. "We're just trying to help, Mum." That we always includes Charles. Even when he's not around. Like they've formed their own little team. And I'm just an obligation. Charles started taking bigger sums from my account. At first, I didn't notice. Then I did. 1 month, $1,500 gone. The next, $2,300. I checked a statement he left on the table by accident. My heart sank. I hadn't spent any of it. He had. Elaine showed up that afternoon with frozen meals. "Just heat and eat, Mum. Super easy." She said it like she was proud. Like this was a gift. I looked at the box. The meals were past their expiration date. 2 months old. I pointed it out. "They're fine," she snapped. "You fuss too much." Fuss. That word again. That meant, shut up. That meant, don't complain. She kissed my forehead on the way out. "You're lucky to have us. Some people your age are in homes." Lucky. I stood there after she left. My skin still felt cold where she'd touched it. Not warm. Not affectionate. Cold. Lucky? To be starved? To be ignored? To be managed like a task? I opened the fridge. Closed it again. I walked to the front door. Opened it. Closed it. Just to remind myself that I still could. Later that week, I overheard Elaine on the phone. "Once the will's finalized, we'll have more freedom." The will. My will. They're not looking after me. They're watching the clock. I tried to call the bank. The number didn't go through. Or maybe they had it blocked. Charles said he'd handle everything. I saw another statement he'd left out. My savings had dropped by almost $8,000 in the last few months. And I had nothing to show for it. I stayed up that night. I made a list of everything they'd said. Everything they'd done. "You don't need that. You're wasting money. Don't be dramatic. You always imagine problems. You're lucky to have us." They think I don't remember. But I do. I remember every time I gave up something for them. Every night I didn't sleep. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. The next morning, I found the old red file box. From the 1990s. Still had the label on it. I dusted it off. Opened it. Everything was still there. Insurance. House deeds. Bank documents. My original will. I laid them out on the table. One by one. Then I made tea. Black. No milk. I didn't sit down. I stood in the kitchen. Sipping slowly. Staring at the papers. This house won't be my prison. It will be my line in the sand. I walked to the drawer by the back hallway. Took out the old landline phone. The one they forgot I had. I dialed carefully. "Hello." "Yes. My name is Margaret Wexley. I want to report financial misuse. By my children. I have the records. I'm ready." My voice didn't shake. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. I walked back to the fridge. Opened it one last time. The apple was still there. Bruised. Forgotten. I picked it up. Held it. Then I dropped it in the bin. Let them rot. I will not rot with them. The silence after betrayal isn't loud. It doesn't crash through doors or shatter glass. It just sits. Heavy. Quiet. Like fog seeping into the corners of a house. That's how it felt the day after I made the call. Nothing happened. No fireworks. No sirens. Just me, sitting at the table with a lukewarm cup of tea, staring at the paperwork I had gathered. I kept thinking, this is what it feels like to stop pretending. They still hadn't called. Not Elaine. Not Charles. I half expected some kind of reaction. Maybe they'd notice the bank account was locked. Maybe they'd panic. But the phone stayed quiet. In that quiet, memories started rising. They came slow at first, like the beginning of a storm. And then they didn't stop. I remembered the time I stayed up all night sewing Elaine's Halloween costume. She wanted to be a sunflower. I didn't have the money to buy fabric, so I cut up yellow dish towels and glued them into petals. She cried the next morning because it didn't look like the store-bought one her classmate had. It's embarrassing, she had said, her lip curled. Why can't you be normal like other mums? I remember smiling and saying, you'll be the brightest flower there. She didn't smile back. I remember Charles, maybe 10 years old, breaking the neighbor's window with a baseball. I went door to door that night, scrubbing their driveway and garden path to pay for it. I didn't tell him what I did. I just told him it was okay. And he never asked. That's what my life became, cleaning up after everyone without complaint. I didn't just love them. I bent myself out of shape to make sure they never felt the sharp edges of the world. And now? Now they act like I've always been a burden. Elaine used to slam the door when she got home from high school. Every time. Not once did she say hello first. If I asked her how her day was, she'd roll her eyes. God, Mum. Why are you always hovering? I wasn't hovering. I was trying. I wanted to be what she needed. But apparently, what she needed was someone else entirely. Charles started smoking when he was 15. I found the pack of cigarettes in his sock drawer and cried in the bathroom. I didn't yell. I didn't shame him. I just left a note, please talk to me. He never did. Instead, he told his sister I was too emotional. Too emotional. That's the label they still give me. Elaine says I overthink. Charles says I take things too personally. But I remember everything. Like the Christmas I pawned my wedding ring so they could have a proper meal. Or the time I walked 4 miles in the snow because the car had died and Charles needed new shoes for his first job. When their father passed, I didn't take time to grieve. I couldn't. They were both still living at home. They needed school supplies, money for class trips, hot meals. I went back to work 2 days after the funeral. I used to cry in the shower. Not because I was sad, but because it was the only place no one could hear me. Elaine once said I have a talent for suffering. I don't think she meant it kindly. When Charles got into trouble with credit card debt, who bailed him out? I did. Quietly. Without asking questions. I thought he'd learn from it. Instead, he came back 6 months later asking if I could co-sign on a loan. When I hesitated, he looked hurt. I thought you believed in me. So I signed. He defaulted. Elaine told me, you just make bad decisions, Mum. That's why we have to handle things for you now. That one stuck with me. Not because it was true. But because I realized that's how she justified it all. That's how they made it make sense. I was the problem. I was the one who needed to be managed, controlled, silenced. When they told me to stop buying fresh fruit, they weren't thinking about nutrition or cost. They were telling me, you don't deserve anything that spoils. you don't deserve comfort. And I believed it. For a while. I believed it every time I poured old milk into my tea. Every time I stared at canned beans and told myself they were fine. Every time I smiled through their comments like they were doing me a favor. That's what hurts most. Not the food. Not the money. But how easily I let them shape me into someone who didn't matter. I remember one afternoon, not long after Elaine got married, I called her just to talk. She sighed halfway through the call and said, "Mom, I have a life now." A life now. Like I didn't give up mine for hers. When Charles moved out, he didn't tell me his new address for 2 weeks. Said he forgot. But when he needed help with his rent, he remembered my phone number just fine. I always said yes. Even when it hurt. Even when I couldn't afford it. Even when I had to pull from the little I had saved. Elaine says she checks on me out of obligation. She said it once when she thought I was asleep on the sofa. I wasn't. I heard every word. "I can't keep running over there every week," she told her husband. "It's not like she appreciates it." Appreciate what? The spoiled food? The restrictions? The way she talks to me like I'm a mistake she has to manage? Charles told someone on the phone, she's not all there anymore. We're keeping her stable. Stable. Like I'm a condition. Like I'm an illness to contain. I've read the pamphlets they leave on my kitchen table. Brochures about senior care. About assisted living. They never say it directly, but the message is clear. They don't want me here. They want my house. My savings. My silence. But I remember who I am. I am not a problem. I am not weak. I am not less. I am Margaret. I raised 2 children alone. I kept this house standing when every piece of it tried to fall apart. I cooked, cleaned, saved, scraped. I gave them everything. And they still look at me like I've overstayed my welcome. The truth is, I've been unwelcome for a long time. When I brought up the missing money, Charles said, "Don't worry about it. It's not like you were using it." Elaine said, "You're always so suspicious." It's exhausting. Exhausting. That's how they see me. As a weight. As something that drains them. But they're wrong. I've carried them for decades. I carried them when they didn't know it. When they were too proud to say thank you. When they called it help but treated it like entitlement. Now, I sit in my chair, tea in hand, looking at the photos on the mantel. Birthday parties. First days of school. Their faces, so small, so full of wonder. And I ask myself, where did that wonder go? When did they stop seeing me as their mother and start seeing me as a burden? The hurt runs deep. Deeper than I thought. I used to think I'd die with it. That I'd keep shrinking, making myself smaller, until there was nothing left. But not anymore. Not after that call. Not after locking the accounts. Not after reading my own will with fresh eyes and realizing that I still have choices. That I still have the power to decide who gets what. That I don't owe them anything just because they share my blood. Family is not a guarantee. Love is not a debt. They made their choices. They planted every seed of this distance. Now they'll live with the harvest. I may be alone. But I am not empty. And I am done pretending they didn't break my heart. I gather the papers. Neat stack. Strong hands. Still steady. Tomorrow, I will visit my lawyer. I will amend the documents. I will write their names out of the future I once imagined. It won't be done in anger. It will be done in truth. Because I finally see them. And, finally, I see myself again. Tonight, I will sleep with the window open. Let the wind in. Let the old air out. No more lists in my head. No more guilt tucked into my pillowcase. Just silence. But this time it won't be heavy. It will be mine. They didn't notice at first. Not when the bank accounts froze. Not when their phone notifications started piling up. I waited. Not with anger. With a calm so unfamiliar, it almost frightened me. The snow had started falling again, a slow, steady blanket outside my window. I watched it settle on the railing like a quiet witness. The house was warm, but I still wrapped the old quilt tighter around my shoulders. The one I'd made when Elaine was still in kindergarten. Back when she used to crawl into my bed at night after a nightmare. Before she learned how to weaponize silence. I didn't go to Elaine's for dinner that week. She had invited me, more out of form than care. "We'll have something light," she'd said over the phone. "Soup. Maybe crackers. You don't eat much anyway." I said I'd think about it. Then I didn't show. And I didn't call. I baked a small chicken instead. For myself. I seasoned it the way I liked, stuffed it with lemon and rosemary. I set the table for one. I used the cloth napkin they gave me 10 Christmases ago. The one they told me was too fancy to actually use. For once, I used it anyway. The phone rang during dinner. It was Elaine. I let it go to voicemail. The next morning, Charles sent a message. "Are you okay? Mom, you didn't say anything about missing dinner." That was the first ripple. The first sign they realized something was different. That the reliable script had changed. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the stack of notebooks I'd filled over the years. Grocery lists. Budget plans. Loan repayment schedules. Quiet, invisible labor. My handwriting, small and neat, detailing the architecture of a life built entirely for them. Each page was a piece of me. Each word, a reminder that I had always kept this house running. Later that afternoon, I canceled Charles's auto insurance. I had been paying the bill for years without him noticing. It had been temporary support, until he got back on his feet. That was over 6 years ago. No notice. No explanation. Just gone. That evening, the phone rang again. Elaine. Then Charles. Then both, in a group message. "Mom, we're worried. Are you okay? Please let us know." Worried. It would have meant more if they hadn't spent the past 2 years treating me like a tired piece of furniture. They were worried because something had changed. Because I was no longer feeding the machine. No longer funding their safety nets. I still didn't reply. The next morning, I wrote a list. Not of chores. Not of bills. A list of everything I would no longer do. I would no longer answer calls that begin with, "Can you just?" I would no longer make excuses for their behavior. I would no longer let guilt decide what I put in my fridge. I would no longer be the silent one. I folded the list and taped it to the inside of my pantry. A place only I would see. A promise to myself. 3 days later, they showed up. I was drinking tea when I heard their voices on the porch. Muffled, hurried. I didn't move to open the door. I listened instead. "Elaine, she's not answering. Something's wrong. Charles, maybe we should have called sooner." Elaine knocked. "Mom, are you in there?" I didn't speak. She knocked again. "Mom, we're worried. Please open the door." I sipped my tea. Earl Grey. Warm. Just the right amount of honey. They knocked 3 more times before I finally stood up. I opened the door, just a crack. Enough to see them. Enough for them to see me. Elaine looked thinner. Nervous. Charles looked tired. "Why didn't you come to dinner?" she asked. "I didn't want soup and crackers," I replied. Elaine blinked. "We were worried." "I've been fine." Charles stepped forward. "The bank called me. They said some access was revoked?" I nodded. "Yes." He stared. "You didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't think it was your concern anymore." Elaine folded her arms. Mom, what's going on? I paused. Then I said, I'm taking care of myself. You should try it sometime. They didn't know what to say. Charles's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Elaine opened her mouth, closed it, then asked, Are you mad at us? Such a simple question. So childlike. It almost made me laugh. I said quietly. But now I'm just done. They stood there, unsure. Like visitors at a museum they didn't understand. I think you should go, I added. Elaine's voice cracked. Mom, we love you. We thought we were helping. I looked her straight in the eye. No. You were managing me. Charles looked away. Elaine looked down. I shut the door. Not loud. Not slamming. Just firm. Inside, I leaned against it, letting the warmth of the moment steady me. They didn't knock again. And that's when it hit me, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. I remembered the day after their father's funeral, when I came home to a cold kitchen, and no one asked if I had eaten. Elaine had gone to a friend's party. Charles was watching TV. I stood at the sink, staring at the dishes and thinking, no one sees me. Not even now. That moment returned like a weight to the chest. And suddenly I realized, this had always been the pattern. I gave. They took. I cried in secret. They forgot. I could have yelled that day. I could have broken plates and screamed. But I didn't. I put on water for tea. And I remained silent, for their comfort. I've done it for decades. But not anymore. That night, I lit a candle. The one I had saved for special occasions. Lavender and vanilla. I let it burn through dinner. Roast vegetables. Tea. A small square of dark chocolate. I ate slowly. Without apology. Without conversation. Just quiet and peace. The next morning, I called my lawyer. We rewrote the will. Removed names. Added protections. Clarified boundaries. I asked him, is it too late to make these changes? He smiled gently. It's never too late to reclaim what's yours. I left the office that day feeling taller. Not physically. But inside. I stopped at the market on my way home. Bought myself fresh raspberries. Full price. No discount sticker. I carried them home like a prize. I ate them one by one that afternoon while sitting on the porch. Cold, sweet, real. At home, I turned off the answering machine. I unplugged the wireless phone. I sat by the window and listened to the snow. No guilt. No shame. Just breath. Later that week, I received a card. From Elaine. No return address. Just a typed message. We're sorry if we hurt you. We just wanted what's best. If. That word erased the whole sentence. I put the card in the drawer with the others. The one sent out of duty, not love. Then I made soup. From scratch. Carrots, onion, garlic, thyme. I let it simmer all afternoon. It tasted like choice. It tasted like something I wanted. I am no longer waiting to be appreciated. I am no longer waiting for apologies that never come. I have stopped answering the door to guilt. This is what peace looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is the part where I stop shrinking. And I begin to take up space again. It started with silence. Not mine, this time, it was theirs. For the first few days, I heard nothing. No phone calls. No knocks. No messages. I thought perhaps they'd finally let go. I thought, just maybe, they'd realized that I wasn't bluffing. But it wasn't over. Not yet. On the fourth morning, the first letter came. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't warm. It was a formal envelope addressed in Charles's scrawl, the kind he used when writing checks. Inside was a printed list of expenses from the past year, highlighted. Your support has always been appreciated. But we think it's only fair to revisit these contributions since the current arrangement seems to be changing. That word again. Fair. My hand trembled slightly as I folded the paper and placed it into a drawer. I didn't need to read it twice. I already knew what it said, and more importantly, what it meant. They were calculating their losses. Next came Elaine, though not in person. A text. Just 5 words. Are you really doing this? No greeting. No context. Just accusation wrapped in disbelief. Like I'd betrayed some invisible contract. My reply was short. Yes. Her response came quickly, "We're not the villains here, Mum." That was the moment it became clear. They weren't looking for understanding. They wanted to erase the mirror I'd held up. The one that showed them what I looked like when I stopped bending. The next week brought Charles to my front porch. Not alone. He had his wife with him, Janine. She held a folder in her hands like it was evidence. I didn't open the door. I watched from the window as they rang the bell. Once. Twice. Then Charles spoke through the door, voice raised just enough for me to hear. "Mum, we're just trying to figure out why you're doing this. All this paperwork, it doesn't make sense. You're not yourself." That line hit me in the gut. You're not yourself. That was their code for, you're not the version of you we prefer. The compliant, quiet, endlessly giving version. I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrote a note and slipped it under the door, "Please leave. I'm not accepting visitors today." They stood there for another minute. Then footsteps. Silence again. And just when I thought they might retreat, the messages began. From Charles, "We didn't want to say this, but you've changed. Everyone's talking about it. Even Aunt May said she's concerned." From Elaine, "Mum, this isn't like you. You always said family comes first." I stared at those words until they blurred. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one asked why I made the choices I did. They weren't seeking clarity. They wanted control back. But then it turned hostile. Charles left a voicemail, shouting. Not yelling to be heard. Shouting in anger. "How could you embarrass us like this? You shut us out, you freeze the accounts, and now you're acting like we're strangers. After everything we've done." Elaine followed 2 hours later. "I hope you're happy. You've turned your back on your children. Your grandchildren. We've been patient, but this is ridiculous. It's not normal." Even Janine chimed in. A message on social media that wasn't addressed to me directly, but it didn't need to be. Some people forget who stood by them when no one else would. Entitlement has an age too. I knew it was about me. Everyone in our circle did. And when their friends started calling, yes, friends I'd once fed, once driven home in the rain, I understood the campaign had begun. "Maggie," said one voice over the phone, "I just don't understand. Charles and Elaine are so upset. They say you've cut them off. Is that really what you meant to do?" "Yes." But I didn't answer. Instead, I made scones. With raisins. Ate them fresh with butter. Warm. Whole. A few days later, I received an email from Elaine. It was long and sharp. "You've made your point. We get it. You want space. But punishing us like this is extreme. You've always said love means forgiveness. Where is that now? You're proving everyone right, you've been holding this bitterness for years. Punishing." It was incredible how quickly boundaries became punishment in their eyes. They didn't see my silence as healing. They saw it as vengeance. But I didn't engage. Because I knew what they really missed wasn't me. It was access. A week later, I ran into a neighbor while walking to the post office. She greeted me warmly, then paused. I heard your daughter was here last week. Everything all right? I nodded. Smiled. Everything's fine. She studied me. Well, you look stronger. Happier, actually. Whatever you're doing, it suits you. That night, I lay in bed and let those words repeat in my mind. You look stronger. You look happier. Because I was. Even with the pressure mounting. Even with the whispered judgment. Even with the weight of knowing that my own children saw me as a means to an end, I felt lighter. I hadn't realized how much I'd been carrying. Their disappointment. Their expectations. Their version of love, which always had strings attached. I stopped checking the mailbox daily. I unplugged the landline permanently. I returned my lawyer's call confirming the final updates. And then came the final blow. Elaine sent a long message one Sunday afternoon. Mom, we've always been there for you. We drove you to appointments. We picked up groceries. We even paid some of your bills when times were tight. And now you're just cutting us off? It feels cruel. Cruel. As if boundaries were violence. As if reclaiming myself was some kind of attack. I didn't respond. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the branches sway in the wind. And I reminded myself of the years I spent silently giving, silently hurting. Cruel? Cruel was asking your mother to live off expired milk and telling her to be grateful. Cruel was spending her savings without consent, then acting like she imagined it. Cruel was erasing her identity the moment it no longer served your plans. So no, I wasn't cruel. I was finally kind. To myself. The real storm came at the next family gathering. I didn't go, of course. But word traveled. A cousin called. Then Aunt May. Then one of Elaine's friends, who had always liked me but never interfered. I just wanted to say, she said over the phone, her voice soft, I admire you. It takes courage to stand up for yourself, especially at your age. At your age. A phrase I once would have bristled at. But now? It felt like a badge of honor. Because it was never too late. The fallout spread. Social media posts with vague lines like, when people forget who raised them. And, some bridges burn themselves. I didn't reply. They wanted me to come crawling back. To defend myself. But I had nothing to defend. My peace didn't need justification. That winter, I started taking long walks again. I rejoined the library book club. I even started baking more, not because anyone expected it, but because I wanted to. And then something happened I didn't expect from myself. I reached out to someone from my past. A friend I hadn't spoken to in over 15 years. We talked for hours. Laughed. Remembered the people we used to be. And I realized, I'm still that person. Just finally free to live like her. One day, a card came in the mail. Not from Elaine or Charles. But from a woman I barely remembered, a nurse who had once helped care for their father. You probably don't remember me, it read, but I'll never forget the kindness you showed me during a hard time. You made me feel seen. I hope someone is doing that for you now. You deserve it. I read that line again and again. You deserve it. Because deep down, that was the root of everything. For years, I didn't believe I did. But now? Now I do. Let them be confused. Let them whisper. Let them rewrite the story. I know the truth. And for the first time, I'm living it out loud. The letter came in spring. A thick envelope, heavier than most, tucked among grocery flyers and utility bills. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Charles's. Stiff. Precise. Like he wrote with a ruler pressed beneath his knuckles. I knew what it was before I opened it. The cover letter was short. Mum, since we've had no success reaching you directly, we've had to proceed legally regarding the estate. We hope you'll reconsider. Below that, documents. Inquiries. Warnings. Requests for mediation. There was no mention of love. No line that said, "Are you all right?" No question asking why I'd pulled away. Just paper. Cold. Demanding. Entitled. I read it once. Then again. Then slowly, as if my eyes had to teach my heart what it already knew, they hadn't changed. They were just getting louder. I placed the letter on the kitchen table and poured myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey. Strong. Then I sat down and started writing. Not to them. To myself. A list of every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. Every meal I skipped to pay a bill for one of them. Every weekend spent babysitting, cleaning, smiling when all I wanted was to rest. It filled 3 pages. I folded the list and tucked it in the back of my journal. Proof. Not that I needed any, but still. Then I took a deep breath and lit a candle. I wasn't going back. What followed was worse than silence. It was rage. Charles called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that started polite and slipped into something else. "You're hurting the family, Mum. You've embarrassed us. People are talking. Do you even care what this is doing to your grandchildren?" I didn't reply. Elaine sent a long email that same night. Pages of grievances disguised as concern. "We tried so hard. We've always helped you. But your attitude lately is toxic. You've poisoned the atmosphere. The kids don't even ask about you anymore. They don't understand what's wrong with Grandma. They made me the villain. They edited the story. And in every new version, I was smaller, colder, crueler. It was exhausting. I told my lawyer, proceed with everything. I didn't want delays. I didn't want loopholes. I wanted clarity." He nodded. He understood. He'd seen it before. People like me, quiet givers, eventually make a line in the sand. And when we finally do, those who benefited from our silence call it a betrayal. 2 weeks later, Elaine came to my door. I saw her through the peephole. No makeup. No children. Just her. I opened the door, but only halfway. She didn't wait for an invitation. "Mum," she said, "please. Can we talk?" I didn't move. "I just want to understand," she continued. "Why now? Why cut us off? We didn't do anything that bad." That bad. That word stuck in my throat. "I gave you everything," I said quietly. She shook her head. "We never asked for everything. No. You just expected it." She looked away. "It's not like you're poor. You had more than enough." The audacity. The math of her heart, so broken it could only calculate in what was owed. "I wanted love," I said. "You wanted an account balance." "I wanted a mother who didn't make everything about her," she snapped. And there it was. The truth in her eyes. The resentment. The disgust. She didn't miss me. She missed my utility. "I think you should go," I said. She left without another word. That night, I found an old letter from my late husband tucked in a forgotten book. Dated 35 years ago. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. "No matter what happens, Maggie, promise me you won't become invisible." I stared at that line for a long time. Because that's exactly what I had done. I had disappeared behind grocery lists and emergency loans. Behind bedtime stories and last-minute favors. Behind quiet nods and of course, dear. But not anymore. I sent one letter. To both of them. Short. Final. Honest. This is not about punishment. This is about peace. I'm choosing it. And I hope someday you do too. Then I signed it with my full name. No, Mum. Just Margaret. A week passed. Then another. And then something I never expected. Janine emailed me. Just 2 lines. I think I understand now. I'm sorry for my part in all of it. I didn't respond. But I saved the message. That winter, I joined a painting class at the community center. My hands were stiff, but I learned. I laughed. I listened to stories from women like me, women who had been the background in their own lives. One of them brought homemade cookies every week. Another shared old family recipes. I felt more seen in that room than I had in my own kitchen for years. Then one evening, as we packed up, someone asked, "Margaret, how did you finally say no?" I smiled. I just realized I was allowed to. And that was the truth. I began sleeping better. Waking up slower. Eating fruit with my breakfast because I liked it, not because I needed to stretch the meal. Spring passed. Summer arrived. And one morning, I walked to the post office and found another card. From a young woman who had once lived next door. Now grown. Married. Far away. You probably don't remember, it said, but when I was a child, you once sat with me on the porch while I cried over a broken toy. You didn't fix it. You just listened. I've never forgotten that. You were the first adult who made me feel heard. Thank you. Tears filled my eyes. Not from sadness. From something else. Something warm. Gratitude. Recognition. It had always been there. Just not from the people I kept handing my heart to. That evening, I lit another candle. I sat by the window as dusk settled. Birds chirped. The breeze softened. And I whispered something aloud. I forgive you. But I won't go back. The sky was lavender then. Soft. Free. And so was I. If you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone. You don't have to deserve love. You just have to believe you are enough. And finally, I do.